Hey everyone, welcome to yet another episode of Off World Off Topic. I'm Mark Fox Powell and that guy is Sam Taylor.
Cheers.
So welcome. So this week we're gonna sort of be following on a little bit from last week. It's kind of like a sort of step back, or
Maybe we should have done this one first.
Maybe.
But who cares?
It doesn't matter. It's all good fun.
No.
So we're gonna be talking about access to space.
Yep.
So how do you get off the Earth, basically?
Yeah. We're not really going to be talking about that much about the current ways we do it. More stuff in the future.
Yeah.
So things like space planes, things like space elevators, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, crazy structures and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's gonna be good fun.
Yeah. Again, there's pretty mad ideas in there.
Yeah, there are.
But yeah, should be good. But first, I think we're gonna sort of. I don't know if it's a new section of the show.
Well, we'll see how it goes.
But it's a new thing we're going to start doing anyway. It's reading out and talking about some of the comments we've had on the YouTube videos, or comments that have been written into us specifically.
Yeah.
About perhaps some of the shows or ideas people have had.
And there's been some awesome stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's awesome. It's really cool. So keep it coming.
Yeah, really good discussion.
Stuff that we haven't thought of, and just expanding all of the kind of ideas we've been talking about, which is kind of the whole point of this anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we just want to talk about some cool stuff.
Yeah. So that's good to see.
The more people involved, the better. So last week we did, like you said, different ways to travel around the galaxy.
Yeah.
And one thing we sort of didn't really touch on, didn't really mention, was how when you get close to the speed of light, your time slows down. You get time dilation.
Yeah.
So your time slows down relative to those on the Earth.
Yeah.
Or on other bodies that are moving at different speeds. So we had Torsten wrote in basically saying, you must also consider that traveling close to light speed slows time for the traveller relative to Earth. So a generational ship is not even needed once you travel close to the speed of light.
Yeah.
So,
which is kind of true.
There's a few things. Yeah, there's a few things to unpack there. So that's right. If you're just going point A to B, and you're not thinking about going back or whatever, a generational ship is probably not needed.
Yeah, if you have no need to communicate with Earth or wherever you've come from, and you don't need to worry about going back and like seeing the people that you left behind, then you don't need. It's actually, if you do the maths, it's actually plausible to travel across the entire Milky Way in one human's lifetime, which is one of the comments we had pointed that out.
Yeah.
Which
is nuts.
Is nuts. Yeah. A lot of time would pass, like relative time would pass on Earth during that journey, though. A shitload.
Yeah. So obviously the fact that you get time dilation doesn't mean that things like FTL isn't hugely beneficial. Obviously, you would still want to try, if it was at all possible, to pursue developing that.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't run like an interstellar civilization, basically. With you wouldn't be able to do like commerce and trade and shipping resources and moving people about between like multiple stars. If what you have to rely on is slower than light travel. Yeah,
and obviously there's also that argument that unless it was trying to sort of save itself, how much would people or bodies on the Earth, like governments and stuff, put money into doing something that wasn't going to return either ever or like 100,000 years later?
Yeah, but then maybe that what you've just mentioned then is the kind of special circumstance under which it might happen. Like we have to get out of here.
Yeah.
And eventually we're gonna have to do that anyway.
Yeah.
So if we are totally limited to like sub light speed travel, it might get to a point where we're like, the solar system is screwed, the sun's about to
die.
Mental,
let's get out of here.
Yeah, let's get out of here. So we just pack everyone into giant ships and off we go.
Yeah, and actually we might do an episode about like the circumstances in which we might leave.
Yeah, because that sounds
cool. To leave Earth and how we might do it and stuff.
Yeah.
I think we'll probably do that sometime.
Yeah, that sounds
soon.
fun.
But so it's true. Yes, that you wouldn't need a generational ship, but you might still want to consider one. I think, because unless your express goal is to basically leave and never come back, if you want to come back to Earth, you have an idea. Say it's like an exploratory thing. You want to fly to, I don't know, a star system 10,000 light years away and come back to Earth. You have no idea what sort of Earth you're coming back to when you come back, essentially. It's been a year for you, but the Earth could be like completely unrecognisable.
Yeah.
They may reject you coming back. They may not want you anymore. There might be some bizarre like cult of personality that's taken over the whole world. They might consider like you a biological threat.
Might have even just had a huge technological sort of Armageddon and gone back to like some crazy dark age kind of scenario.
There might have been a cataclysm, like some horrible things happened, a big meteor crashed into the Earth or whatever. and consequently you need to then find another home. So you might not even initially set out on that journey at all as an exploratory journey.
Yeah.
If you weren't basically just leaving forever.
Yeah.
And if you weren't, if that wasn't your espresso was to come back and have explored somewhere, then coming back is a very dangerous thing. So you might want to consider a generational ship in the sense that, yes, you could travel across the Milky Way very, like, short periods of time, like, you know, in years or whatever, few years. Your time is a few years. But actually to find a habitable world that you could settle on and spend time, you know, and actually develop another human civilization on yes, you can travel across the whole Milky Way, but it's going to take a very long time to go from star to star to star to star looking for that. If you have to do it that way,
yeah.
If it's like an unforeseen circumstance, you turn up to Earth, it's like, oh shit.
Yeah. So you'd still want to sort of equip a ship like that.
Potentially, you'd want to you have like a life raft ship, basically. That means that if you come back and there's no human race left, you're the last like lifeboat maybe of humanity. Yeah. You can't have that ship it's only gonna last, you know, 20, 30 years. It's got
to be essentially like a self-sustaining world, essentially, as a ship. Yeah. So it's
definitely an interesting kind of
it's really
area.
Interesting.
I still think there's potentially legs in the generational ship idea. Even though,
even if you could travel across the galaxy in one human lifetime, you still would have requirements to have multiple generations before coming back, or for traveling on, you know, if you haven't found what you wanted to find on that initial journey, you might need to travel on somewhere else or whatever.
And if you were leaving Earth forever, say like we were talking about, and we will talk about this more in another episode, but you're leaving Earth forever, you wouldn't want to go on a ship with everyone on like a bunch of ships that weren't going to be able to sustain themselves indefinitely.
Because you don't know you don't know what you're going to.
You have to build in that existential risk threat. Yeah. And you can't. You don't know really what's going to happen. You're just leaving Earth. You're going. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
You don't know what you're going to come across. So you've got to have something that you know enables you to live indefinitely in kind of just interstellar space. Yeah. If it's possible.
Yeah. So in a universe where faster than light travel is not possible, then I think there's always going to be some use for multi-generational ships, or at least the
concept of them.
Yeah,
certainly
and ultimately we probably will have to do it if we want to survive indefinitely. We'll be faced with the prospect of doing that at some point. Yeah, in the distant future. Well, I mean that's if we haven't sort of gone kind of crazy and like sublimed into some other like sort of machine consciousness, who fuck knows. If we just carry on like a technological kind of biological evolution trajectory, you would imagine at some point we would be forced to kind of come up to that barrier of multi-generational ship. And actually, you might even see that once, not in that too distant future, but maybe once we've sort of colonized the solar system and there's tons of humans, you know, like 100 times more than there are now, maybe 100 billion humans scattered throughout the solar system, that you have like subcultures and factions of people that just decide like, right, screw it, we're going to go off and see you later, and just go off in one of these like super fast high speed ships, and we will never hear from them again, obviously, because in our relative time it will take thousands of years for them to reach wherever they're going.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. So you just have you just have, I mean, you could even argue, you know, it could have happened before. Like, parts of humanity have just disappeared. There's no records of them, not that this would have happened now, but potentially in the future, and then far again in the future, if there weren't records kept in between and stuff, you could have these, you think the human race is dying out, and you actually have colonies of humans that have gone, like, many, many thousands of years ago. Yeah. And that actually, and they may spend some time separately evolving. You know, God, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, that's a crazy thought. I mean, you could even have, like, if you could travel to another star and back in the length of time, relative time within a human lifetime, you could have the same crew of people leave, and then the human race back here kind of forgets about them, and it's like 2,000 years later they reappear, the same people come back in their ship.
And that's not a ridiculous principle. You have to consider that principle when you dispose of things like nuclear waste. Yeah. So when you put nuclear waste in deep subsurface facilities, you have to basically assume that there's going to be no records of that waste being buried there. So you bury it in a place where there's like no economic value to any of the rock. You bury it very deep down. So you take into account everything from like glacial outburst floods, like scouring hundreds of meters of rock out of the earth, And you have to assume that the records would be lost, say, in 15,000 years' time or whatever, when it's still,
still like
you don't want anyone discovering it.
Yeah, it needs to be safe for about 100,000 years from these nuclear repositories.
Yeah.
There's actually some really cool stuff about all that.
Yeah, there is.
Like people discussing like how you would either engineer them so that they're very unlikely for people to come across in the future, or somehow engineer it so that the risks are kind of written not in language but in the landscape, and I don't know, by designing it in such a way that it's obvious that it's not something you should open. But then again, doing that and then say that the information's lost about what it actually is. This is a bit of a tangent, but the information's lost about what it actually is. If you come across something that's clearly been built by a previous civilization, you're gonna open it. It's just gonna happen, like we do with like archaeology now.
No, that's true. We didn't know it contained a curse. Tutankhamun's tomb.
A big old radioactive curse.
It's an interesting idea. It's analogous though to the nuclear repository problem in a way, in the sense that in the sense that you might lose records.
Yeah, and you would know that. You would know that as a crew of one of these ships setting out, you would kind of have to be building that into your plans that when you return, if you're planning on returning, that society might have changed like beyond all recognition.
Yeah.
And they might not even know who you are or like know what you are or anything. Yeah. Which is crazy.
So another comment we had was from Timothy, or Tim, I don't know which he prefers, but we'll just call him Timothy for now, was that you might get advances in propulsion that mean you catch up with people. So say you leave like, I don't know, 10 years and you fly for like 30 years or something, and you've been flying for a while, and then you get caught up by something that's got more advanced propulsion, and it's kind of like that point of like where, like, because they're once they've gone and how long do you wait until you make that journey? Because if they're going to just get overtaken, then the whole thing was sort of pointless.
and actually I think it's put forward as an argument as why we would maybe not send off one of these like really, really long-term generational ships, because unless we can say for certain that we're never going to develop faster than light or even just generally faster propulsion, unless we can say certain, like it's definitely not going to happen, then there's always going to be that risk of like it being a totally pointless endeavor. You send these people off, and then 20 years later you develop technology which is 10,000 times the speed, and you can just overtake them in days. So maybe that actually would stop us, humankind, like actually designing and building one of these things, unless there was a necessity to do it.
Yes, unless there was a necessity. But we would. It's not like we're going to stop exploring things. Like we say, like the Voyager probe is going to get overtaken.
Yeah. I mean, New Horizons is going to overtake Voyager.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a situation a bit like that.
A little bit.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the comment was pointing out that that you could. So say you'd sent one of these ships. You could send with more advanced propulsion. You could send another ship ahead and like set up like a colony or like some infrastructure for when they arrive. They'd be gutted. They'd be like, we've been on this fucking ship for 3 generations,
and they just get there and everything's like there's like a Starbucks.
Surprise!
It's not mysterious at all. There's already a massive city.
It's like a terraformed planet. And just like, oh, right. Okay. That was pointless then.
Yeah. So these are the kinds of comments we want. We want this stuff. So thank you very much, guys, for
good stuff.
Sending us these thoughts of yours. Right.
Main topic.
Let's start the main topic.
Yeah.
It's getting into orbit.
So before we get to any of this like long distance generational advanced propulsion stuff, we need to actually get into orbit because that's tricky.
It is tricky. Obviously we're getting like better at it now, and there's a kind of a faster advance in our technology to get into orbit. Probably there will be very soon, in these like next few decades, a really rapid, almost perhaps never seen rapid
like
advance,
an explosion of technology,
which will allow us to get in and out of orbit. And obviously now we use conventional rockets, mostly just conventional rockets really, to get into orbit. Which is now becoming more advanced. We get some reusable bad boys seem to be the thing, which is of course makes sense. We're going to get some more fancy kind of methane burning rockets, these types of things, in the next few years.
Which are but they're essentially just like
still conventional
variations
rockets.
of the same chemical conventional.
They're just going to get bigger and cheaper, and more reliable, presumably. So the next stage, I suppose, or there's some arguments that it's not necessarily a good idea as the next stage, but one of the long talked about things is single stage to orbit.
Mm-hmm.
So getting into orbit by not jettisoning any hardware.
It's just a vehicle.
Propulsion.
It's just a vehicle that flies into orbit and then lands again.
Yeah, a space
totally
plane.
reusable.
A plane that it tends to be a space plane. It's not always a space plane.
Yeah, there have been some ideas for vertical takeoff, vertical landing, single stage vehicles.
Yeah.
And they always just seem a bit like, well, we'll talk about it in a second, but they always just seem a bit like almost too good to be true. It's like, oh, just design a magic carpet. Like, of course you want a vehicle that can do that, but it's very, very difficult to do.
Yes. Yeah. So one of the ones that's been in the news over the last few years, I mean, it's been in development for quite a while now, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's from like the 90s or something.
Yeah. The engine tech at least has been.
Yeah. Which is the Skylon, which is a UK based group from, what's the name of the company?
Reaction Engines. Reaction Engines. Yeah.
And they're essentially developing what largely all of it's predicated on a really cool new engine type.
Yeah.
And that cool new engine type is basically, in effect, almost one big innovation, which is the pre-cooler.
Yeah.
So the way it works is that the Skylon is basically like I think it's about 80-meter long kind of space plane design.
Which looks pretty cool.
It does look pretty cool.
It's all just conceptual stuff at the moment.
Yeah, but it does look cool.
Yeah, it does look pretty cool.
And they have two of these what are called Sabre engines. Again,
Henge
cool.
name.
Cool name.
They know what they're doing.
And they basically work as a kind of hybrid rocket jet engine.
Yeah. Just air breathing.
It's got an air breathing stage. So basically, it's got like on the Blackbird, it's got those sort of shot cones.
So like the ramjet like cones, right?
Yeah. That does have ramjets in it, but it's not a ramjet engine.
Okay.
Well, it's more complicated than that.
Yeah.
It's actually a really kind of like mixed up engine. It's got all sorts of bits from everything. But basically, the air comes in, slowed down to subsonic speeds. Some of it gets put through this pre-cooler, which is like insanely efficient. It cools.
Do you know the numbers on it? I mean, I have read them. It goes from like thousands of degrees down to like minus 100 and something in a thousandth of a second or something. Yeah. It's insane.
It drops the air temperature hugely.
Yeah.
And it weighs very little. That's the key, and that's the key innovation in the engine.
Is it just it's a really like fine mesh of tubes containing liquid hydrogen?
Liquid hydrogen, which is the thing that the engine burns.
Yeah, so it's just recycling that through the cooling system.
Yeah, it has. So, like with most jet engines, all of the air doesn't go straight down into the engine.
Right.
Some of it goes around the outside, just because they have these that's how they work, these bypass systems.
Yeah.
And because the bypass air would be too slow when it gets to really high speeds, they have like ramjets around the edges of the outside. So the air gets fed back into the thrust at a very high speed, so it goes back out supersonic.
Right.
So it actually has like a circle of ramjets around the edge,
purely just to speed up like the excess air that's flowing around the engine.
That's not
going through the actual compressor.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Yeah. This isn't the stuff going through the compressor.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Stuff going around.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it doesn't slow down the air that's coming out of the back of the engine.
Yeah.
And then so basically the like the Blackbird does. Those cones at the front, those like triangles, shut as it gets faster and faster and faster, letting less and less air in, until it gets to a point where it's I think it's about Mach 5.5.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. And at that point, it's going too fast, and you can't get rid of the heat fast enough.
Yeah.
So you shut the front off, and then you just stick in a load of liquid oxygen as the oxygen instead of the air.
Yeah, and then just fire it like a rocket engine.
And then it just burns like a rocket engine, and you get into orbit that way.
I mean, that is all fucking cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. And I think...
And then it just lands like a plane.
Yeah. It takes off like a plane, it lands like a plane. I think it has to have a pretty massive runway, though.
That's the thing with... So it's not the air-breathing stage of it is not a full ramjet, is it?
It's got ramjet part. It's not a ramjet.
It's not a ramjet, because ramjets, you need to be going like Mach 3 or something for them to actually start working.
Ramjets actually have the weight and power of a ramjet. Weight to power ratio or whatever is nowhere near as good as a Sabre engine.
Okay.
I mean, same with scramjets.
Yeah. So this is being developed. I mean, they've got to the point where they've tested the cooling system on a prototype engine.
The cooling system's got the big tick from the European Space Agency as being like, okay, on
works.
paper this works.
Yeah. And they piled a load of money into reaction engines and stuff.
Yeah. I think BAE have bought 20% of reaction engines.
Oh shit.
for a certain amount of money. I forget which, and I mean that money is going to be used to they basically are backing that as like a technology in the future.
Okay.
I think it was BAE or maybe Boeing, but I think it's BAE.
But the actual vehicle itself, like the Skylon plane, is a long way off, like actually being built and tested, etc.
Yeah, the engine is going to be tested. They're hoping to have like a full working prototype engine, like a fully almost ready to go engine by like 2019. So that's a while away.
That's a while away.
And they think it might be flying by about 2025.
Okay. I mean, it'll come around quickly, I guess, but there's going to be a lot of other changes happening in the meantime with other industries and other technologies.
Yeah.
But I mean, if it works, it's going to be fucking cool.
It'll be really cool. So some of the stuff it brings that you can't. I mean, there's some debate as to whether it's actually going to be
better than like reliably reusable rockets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can do some. It's got a very fast turnaround time.
Yeah.
So you can turn it around potentially in sort of 2 or 3 days. But we don't know how quickly you could return around a reusable rocket.
No idea.
I imagine not that quickly.
Yeah, you would intuitively you'd imagine it would take longer, but maybe that's just because we're used to thinking about rockets as like these really like we're thinking about rocket flight as being something that's like really damaging to the vehicle and stuff, and maybe we'll find from these SpaceX landings and stuff that it's not too bad. We just don't know at this point.
No. And also same with
territory.
reuse of the space plane. I think it is thought that you would be able to reuse the space plane more times than you would a rocket you land vertically.
Yeah.
I think partly just because of the energy expenditure and stuff. The rocket just goes through more stress, I think, or the rocket engines do. There's just more energy expended like early on.
Yeah, okay.
Obviously, it has a rocket burning stage later, but it's when it's already higher in the
atmosphere.
Yeah.
I think the aerodynamic pressure experienced by a space plane lower in the atmosphere is probably less than it would be for a rocket.
Possibly.
I don't know if that's actually true.
I'm not sure. But there is a suspicion that you would be able to potentially use these things, reuse them more times, say 200 times instead of maybe 10, 20 for a rocket. Yeah. Again, we don't know how far advanced these vertically landing.
I wonder how scalable the technology is though, because at the moment the Skylon design is obviously like a certain size.
Yeah.
And that's great for getting small payloads into low Earth orbit. But could you make like a giant space plane for taking like absolutely massive payloads?
Well, it already takes in quite a lot, so it's comparable. It's from like 12 to 15 tons you can get into low Earth orbit, which is about Falcon 9. Falcon 9 1.1's about 13 or something. Okay. 13 tons. So it's in that range.
That's pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty decent.
And because of some other things, you can also do. That's just the space plane. I think then it can have extra stages that come up and do various things. Yeah. But you could potentially take in, according to Reaction Engine's website, up to 30 astronauts.
Shit.
And I'm not quite sure why that you can't. I guess, can you not do that in a rocket because there's not enough? Like, could you not design a capsule that could take 30 on like a Falcon 9?
Yeah, surely if it's just the same mass.
Yeah.
Like the same range of mass as a Falcon 9, then what's limiting you? Just
I don't
space,
know. It might be. Yeah,
yeah, because a rocket you have to take more fuel because you have to take all of your. It's not air breathing at all, so you have to take all of your oxygen with you. So this vehicle has more space. For
the rocket
payload.
You have to take more all your oxygen.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Oh,
rocket. You take all your oxygen.
Whereas
so a lot of the
air.
vehicle is full of tanks, like fuel tanks, oxygen tanks, all that shit. Whereas with the Skylon, we have greater space in the vehicle for payload.
Yeah, maybe that's true. Yeah, because obviously you're burning hydrogen and then only oxygen towards the top.
Although a significant portion of it is still just given over to tanks.
Yeah, it is just like
it's just a giant
two massive
tank.
tanks. Yeah. If you look at the interior design, it's two massive.
Like a little bit
tanks,
in the middle for
a little bit of oxidizer tank, like not so big, and the middle like kind of cargo bay. is tiny. Really.
Yeah, it is tiny.
So we'll see about these space planes. The other argument is so we talked about it can do similar things perhaps to these landable rockets. Yeah, there's some debate as to whether it will be cheaper. So that's going to be one of the clinches, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's going to be it basically.
Yeah.
What else does it come down to? At the end of the day, if you can launch things more like cheaper on rockets, well, reliability is the other thing.
Yes.
But that gets kind of folded into cost in a way.
Yeah.
Like you potentially be paying more for something that's more reliable.
Yeah. I was looking over some of the numbers that people have suggested for the Skylon, how much it would cost to get into orbit.
Right.
and none of them are consistent. They seem to be all over the place, saying how many pounds of whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But for example, I think basically when you do some of the maths, it ends up being in some configurations potentially cheaper than a landable, reusable rocket, but potentially more expensive as well. So somewhere in the ballpark, that they're probably not going to be that dissimilar in price per initially anyway.
Yeah.
The thing that really might get the spaceplane though is the long-term reusability of them. And the fact that there's an earlier technology. The rockets are much older, of course, and we understand them better. So the long-term reusability of these planes is going to be like a clincher. So I suppose it's just...
And now time will tell, basically, what comes out of that.
Yeah.
I do wonder, like, space planes like the shuttle was a space plane, essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very different. It didn't horizontally take off like a plane or anything like that. But essentially, it's a space plane.
Yeah.
And something that we know is a problem with that is the heat shield is just weaker than like the kind of really simple circular heat shields you get on capsules. So maybe you find that kind of thing
that's true,
is going to the reliability of one of them, the heat shield on the Skylon, for example, has got all these kind of complex like corners and angles and stuff to keep heat out of.
I was about to say, I actually don't know much about how that keeps heat out, because it doesn't...
Well, it must just have a heat shield comparable to the shuttle or something.
But it's like designs. It doesn't have like an obvious kind of ceramic tile layer.
It's all black. It's like
it does
just
sort of... But isn't... I would have thought that would be on there. I really don't know much about it. How it deals with
I'd be quite interested in hearing a bit more about that, actually. But that is something that space planes... The simplicity of like a capsule is that you just have this like really simple single piece heat shield, which is much more reliable than having these overlapping tiles or whatever they have on space planes. So that's something that you know.
I have a feeling it doesn't. I don't know. I'm not sure off the top of my head exactly what it has.
Maybe maybe materials technology is advanced enough that you can just clad the whole thing in some kind of crazy.
I don't think it has though.
I'm just making shit off the top of my head. I don't know. I need to read into this because it's cool. It's an interesting. It will impact the reliability and stuff
hugely.
Massively,
I mean,
and how reusable they are, and you know whether they need much the refurbishment and how that compares to rockets and things like that.
Although the problem with this, I suppose the problem with the space shuttle's heat shield was obviously that it was much bigger, but the problem with it, the reason the heat shield failed was because some bit of the rocket initially like smashed a tile, right?
Yeah, it smashed a tile. But I think the argument was that if you'd had that wouldn't have been possible, even if you'd had like debris impact like a heat shield of a capsule, because they have all these overlapping.
Place, though,
yeah, you have all these overlapping tiles, and like one can get knocked off, and that can compromise the whole vehicle.
Yes.
But maybe I don't know. But that is definitely an aspect.
The heat shield is like protected when a rocket goes. It's normally on the top, isn't it? And it's normally sat underneath where it attaches.
Yeah,
it's normally like within the second stage or whatever.
Yeah, so it's not as vulnerable.
It's not actually exposed. I guess the Skylon doesn't have stages, so it doesn't have that problem as such.
No. That's true. Yeah.
But it's still one of those things. The Skylon's going to be totally. Obviously, it might be astronaut rated, but it's going to be totally automated. It's not going to have like a...
Yeah, it's going to be autonomous.
So, I mean, that's not so much... When you've not got to take people in on a consistent basis, one blows up, it's like, it's annoying.
Yeah.
It's a waste of money. But it could, it's not the end of the world. But if they want to make it human rated, then obviously that's a whole pain in the arse. Because they were talking, weren't they, for a while about going outside the space shuttle. There was kind of this discussion as to whether... before it blew up, burnt up.
Whether they had to go out and like check
whether
everything.
They should go out and they'd make the decision not to check it. And then there was that there was talk about
Sketchy.
whether obviously ended in disaster.
Yeah.
But it was whether they could have actually saved them anyway. Another shuttle was already lined up. And was X number of months away from being ready, so they potentially could have rushed it through. And thinking, based on their supplies they could have had, they might have actually been able to do like a rescue mission, which would have been pretty cool.
It would have been cool, yeah. It would have been
it's like Apollo
super
13.
dramatic, super tense, kind of just playing out on the news and stuff. It would have been insane. But that could have potentially ended in like a double disaster if you rush the second shuttle through its prep.
But if
and
you
then
can't,
that one fucking blows up as well. Oops.
But one thing is you can't do necessarily. It might be hard to do spacewalks on a totally autonomous vehicle. Yeah. If you've got a human crew that are in there, they're just sat there like they can't. They're probably not going to be able to get in and out of it. In the same way that the shuttle was designed for kind of like spacewalks.
Yeah, although it will be under like ground control to a certain extent. I mean, there's not going to be its operation is all going to be like automatic or whatever.
True.
But
maybe you could do a spacewalk. It's mass. How big is it compared to the shuttle though?
I'm not sure.
How long's the shuttle?
I don't know.
I think it's quite a lot longer, isn't it?
How long is the Skylon? Do you know?
Like 82 meters or something.
That's big.
It's
really
longer
big.
than a jumbo jet.
Yeah.
Of course. Well, you sit at the weren't they transporting the shuttle on the back of like a giant?
Yeah.
Was it a jumbo? The Americans doing it on a jumbo.
Yeah. 747, I think.
There was that massive like Russian jet that was taking the Russian.
Yeah, that thing is giant. That is unbelievable. I can't believe that thing flies.
Yeah.
Like a skyscraper in the air.
But I have a feeling Skylon's quite a lot bigger than a shuttle, the actual vehicle.
Yeah, it'd be cool to see one. Imagine seeing one like sat on the runway, like at a spaceport, where there's like a fleet of these things.
They'll have to make them take off on the runways in very specific places because they'll be going like hypersonics. They'll be bloody noisy. As they're going up.
Oh, that would be awesome to see one of those things take off.
You have to have them taking over oceans because you're not allowed to actually go supersonic speeds as commercial planes. Like Concorde wasn't allowed to do that over land.
Yeah, they're talking about building like spaceports and stuff in Europe and the UK actually. I don't know why. Surely you want to build it somewhere where you have reliable weather.
Yeah.
Not like an island in the North Atlantic where the weather's like fucking crazy all the time.
I don't know. Maybe it's because the Atlantic's there and you can just sort of.
Yeah, but that's it. That's what I was maybe just about to say. Is that
that's why
you take it off over an ocean, so you stick it on an island next to the Atlantic. It kind of makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, Skylon looks cool.
Skylon looks cool.
It's cool that it's a small company as well.
Yeah, it's nice to see that.
You don't see that very often.
Seeing it more and more now with space technology. So
yeah, no, that's true.
They're another like up and coming company to kind of keep your eye on. Not really doing anything in terms of launch now, obviously, but they will be hopefully. Yeah, it's also nice that they're British, just because it's like a country that's just traditionally not been that involved in space activities so much.
Not in the same way.
There's a lot of British satellite companies building satellites, but certainly not in access to space. So it's all good.
No, exactly. Yeah, just getting everyone involved.
Yeah, is
a good thing.
So there's a few other like space plane designs kicking about. Some of them government. There's an Indian one called the Avatar. Yeah,
right, okay. Why have they made that an acronym?
I don't know. It makes no sense.
Just call it Avatar and forget about the stupid acronym. Yeah. So Avatar, I don't even know what it stands for, but it's ludicrous.
I mean, it doesn't stand for the letters involved in the word Avatar, just like buried in the middle of other words. Like it makes absolutely no sense. Just call it the Avatar. Yeah. It's a badass name.
And like just the Falcon 9's just like Falcon's not an acronym of something. It
doesn't stand for like anything. It's just I don't understand.
I don't think.
I mean, there are some stupid acronyms in science. No, Falcon 9's named after the Millennium Falcon, according to.
And the 9 is the 9 engines, right?
Yeah. The Octaweb.
Yeah.
So the Avatar is just like is a single stage orbit space plane in design, at least.
Yeah, I think some parts of it resemble. It does things like it liquefies the air.
It's liquefying air. Yeah.
Which apparently has not as good efficiency as the Sabre engines in the Skylon.
Yeah, that's right.
And the thing that predated the Skylon, the thing that the guys at Reaction Engines were working on prior to working on Skylon was called like the Hotel or something like that, and that had a similar liquefying air engine.
So that's I guess that's a way of possibly getting around that problem of superheated air. So before you have the technology of the cooling system,
it's to do with like how you compress the air, how heavily you compress the air and stuff. But yeah, I guess that's just that's another design. We'll see how that goes.
See how it goes.
There's not as much information I don't think about Avatar as there is out for Skylon.
No.
It doesn't seem to have garnered as much interest.
No, but I don't know. We'll see. Yeah. It's possible that you'll get like a prototype of that before you get like a Skylon prototype. Yeah. But I don't think the capabilities are anywhere near as big. It's got something like 1,000 kilos payload capacity.
Is that right?
So it's going to be small deal. But cool. It's still cool technology development and everything.
Yeah, it could be cheap for putting small satellites in. You'd be suspicious though if they're putting in that small amount in orbit, that it's going to be cheaper than reusable rockets.
Yeah.
Probably. I mean, who knows? The economics of these things are so like murky.
So murky and so just unknown.
Yeah.
Until start using space planes and work out like how reliable and how reusable they are, and
same with rockets.
We just won't know.
So the other kind of weird design is obviously there's like we talked about the space shuttle, we talked about other designs for a single stage to orbit, space planes, but there's a weird kind of outliery one, which is the Venture Star, which is now not in development anymore.
That's a Boeing. It was contracted to Boeing from the American government, right? And it went through all these development stages. Yeah. It's like the ugliest looking thing.
It's kind of odd looking.
It's weird. It's just really like a massive triangle.
Triangle kind of.
I don't really get it. It doesn't look very aerodynamic for a start.
It's a really bizarre looking like vehicle.
Yeah.
It kind of just like a triangle that sort of takes off vertically. It doesn't have boosters or anything. A single stage, as we said. And it
lands like a plane, so it's a space plane.
Lands like a plane, so it takes off
kind
vertically,
of a space plane,
but lands horizontally.
Yeah, I mean the space shuttle was technically classed as a space plane as well, so I think you could probably lump this in that category, kind of.
Yes. No. Yeah. Sure. I know we're talking about single stage to orbit space planes.
Yeah.
But it is a space. It's as close. Because there's another one that's going to be the shuttle was space as a space plane. There's another like redesigned small shuttle thing, isn't there? By like Sierra.
Yes, that's right.
Or whatever.
What's the name of it?
I can't remember. Oh, the Dream Chaser.
Something like that, yeah.
And that thing it counts as a space plane. It takes off, but it goes off on the top of a rocket and basically re-enters the atmosphere in a similar way to almost like a capsule, it's basically a small shuttle, and that's a space plane. But the Venture Star, the one thing I would recommend looking up on the Venture Star is the photo of the potential engines.
It's fucking awesome.
The aerospike engines.
Yeah, they're amazing.
It looks so unbelievably cool.
Yeah.
It's like kind of like a sort of triangle shape.
Yeah, like a wedge.
Yeah, like a wedge shape.
That's like long, so it's not like a circular cone like you get.
No.
Or like a bell or like a circular cone. No. It's a wedge shape that's like long, and then the thrust.
There seems to be lots of engines. Or I don't quite know how it works, but there seems to be a lot of engines along it.
Yeah, they sort of feed
like have a waterfall of flame down each side of the wedge.
That's a good word, the waterfall of flame.
And it looks so cool.
Yeah, it works in a similar way to like a bell engine, which uses like the outside of the bell to focus the thrust.
Yeah,
it's actually just using like the air pressure on either side of that wedge to focus the thrust into like the point underneath the wedge.
Doesn't that mean that it's really like it's more efficient than normal?
Somehow means it's more efficient. Yeah,
I think it's to do with the
loads of altitudes. Yeah, lots of altitudes. Yeah,
I think it's to do with the fact that the Bell engines, like you get like the compression of the exhaust from the outside air pressure changes, and you can only make it like perfectly efficient at one height, whereas these aerospike engines are they'll adapt to more
the ambient pressure basically.
Yeah. So I think it's like
so they'll be working at maximum
20 or 30% more efficient potentially than a rocket
which
engine.
is what you need probably for a single stage to orbit.
Yeah,
but the pictures of it look fucking awesome.
Yeah,
like it's a really cool thing.
It's really cool.
It'd be cool to have that just incorporated into more designs.
But they ran out of. They basically were doing that work, weren't they, for a while? They did on Venture Star.
Yeah,
like prototypes for it.
I mean, if you look at the list of stuff that had to be folded into that Venture Star design, it was. This is what I was saying earlier on about Magic Carpet, because it was literally like, I know, guys. Why don't we just design a rocket that can fly as a single stage into orbit and land like a plane and do all this other stuff? And it's like well, obviously we would have done that if we could have, it's like,
oh really?
Yeah, it just seemed too good to be true, like reading the list of stuff,
Yes, okay.
It's like, yeah, so but they had to have all these advancements in materials technology for keep getting the mass right down, and obviously the aerospike engines are a big part of like the thrust, maximizing thrust and all this kind of stuff. So it had to have all these technologies sort of developed before a prototype could even be built.
Yeah.
And it just sort of fell apart during all of that development.
They had a failure with the hydrogen tank.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Was it hydrogen? Yeah, liquid hydrogen.
Yeah, liquid hydrogen tank.
Yeah.
They had to make it out of some material, and there was like some problem with like the choice of material, and someone they went down one road and they should have gone down the other road, and it was too late, and it all got it's all buried in like piles of bureaucracy.
They couldn't stop it leaking properly. It had to be a certain weight, didn't it?
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the technologies for Venture Star are like have been developed for other reasons today, and actually it's not. If people tried to make it now, it would be a much kind of more fruitful endeavour potentially.
Yeah, which begs the question: is like, why aren't people working on something like this?
Yeah, someone like SpaceX.
Someone like SpaceX. You think that if this was like a really viable, like, even though you need to make all these technological developments in order to build it, if it was a viable thing to build a single stage orbit vehicle and it's doable, then why isn't it being done? And maybe that the answer to that is that it's not actually any better than reusable rockets.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, that's probably Elon's answer to it. I mean, he's obviously will have considered it.
Yeah.
Like him and SpaceX.
Because obviously, like, SpaceX could be also... I mean, SpaceX is a rocket company, but would they ever think about developing an air-breathing... I mean, it's a totally different, like, industry. But I know that I've heard in an interview with Elon that he said that when he basically, like, did the maths or something, looked at it, thought that actually you would always end up being, like, a cheaper vertically landing rocket. It would always end up being cheaper doing that than having an air-breathing stage, and actually it's just better to use rockets the whole way up.
Yeah, but the Venture Star wasn't air-breathing.
No, I know it wasn't.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. Like,
so that's why they're not doing space planes, or at least that's why he said that they're not. And obviously it's a different industry, and they need very different expertise. And also the technology is much further off, whereas SpaceX is on a shorter timeline to get to Mars, so it needs rockets. But in terms of the Venture Star, you would have thought they'd investigate something like that if they thought it represented a better way of doing it.
Yeah, but maybe the problem comes from...
But maybe, I mean, you can't, like... Everyone can't come up with every idea all the time. You know, they've got a certain set of experts at SpaceX to do a certain set of things.
Yeah. But it does seem... It just seems... Like, landing multiple stages of a rocket vertically on different parts of the Earth just seems like more of a technological challenge than landing... If you can develop all the right materials and technology for it, than just, like, taking off a rocket and landing it. Like, it's just a total single stage. And maybe the reason is
maybe
that,
it's payload.
Yeah, well, maybe the reason is that it's just like economically makes less sense, because you have to actually take all of your mass up with you to orbit with a single stage to orbit vehicle. So you have to take enough fuel to take all of that mass with you, whereas with a multi-stage vehicle, you just drop off stages.
Yeah. Because you take all your oxygen and all your mass.
Yeah, and if you're reusing those stages that you leave behind, then it doesn't really matter the fact that it's multiple stages, because you reuse them anyway.
Yeah, you might find something like Venture Star as well. Like its maximum capability of stuff to put into orbit is not as high as going down like a whole rocket family that goes all the way, up to the BFR or whatever.
Yeah.
Although that's a different rocket family, of course, to the Falcon. So up to the Falcon Heavy, say. I don't know what its maximum. They thought what its maximum kind of low Earth orbit payloads were, but I wouldn't. It's not going to be like whatever the Falcon Heavy. It's like 53 tons or something like that. It's not going to be like that. I don't think. It was about the same size as a shuttle, similar in terms of like. I remember seeing a picture of it next to the
Venture
shuttle.
Star.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot like chiller.
Yeah, it's a very different shape.
It's a lot wider. But I don't know if, in terms of its payload capacity. But you'd imagine that a lot of that space would be fuel tanks.
Yeah.
Just because that's how the way rockets work.
Yeah.
And the thing with reusable multi-stage rockets is that you can drop a load of that halfway up. You don't need to take it all with you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's an interesting idea.
But then again, well, I was going to say, then again, if you have all the fuel tanks with you, once you're in orbit, you can refuel and then do other stuff with it, possibly.
That's true. You can still do that with conventional rockets. Once you just have to. You can't. You don't have the first stage up there, but you have potentially a second stage that you could refuel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe that's one reason though, is that you could refuel it.
You could refuel it, and then you could do like real deep space, like high velocity missions to go to the outer planets or something.
Yeah, because obviously you can do that by just chucking up loads of conventional rockets.
Yeah, and building something.
Preferably, surely you'd want to do that with as least vehicles as possible within a price point.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's like a price benefit kind of curve there that you fall on at some point, and at some point it makes more sense to build a bigger rocket or use a whatever plane.
Yeah.
Not use thousands of very tiny rockets or whatever.
And maybe the Mars colonial transporter thing, once we find out what that is, the SpaceX thing, is going to be, obviously it's going to be probably a multi-stage rocket that takes it up or whatever. But the actual thing up in orbit that again goes to Mars probably need to be refueled on orbit and then fire off.
Yeah.
A bit like what I was just describing from the Venture Star.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway. Yeah. So.
What? So if you've got an option then.
Yeah.
Between a normal rocket.
Yeah.
And a space plane.
Right.
So you've got one flight. Okay.
Okay.
You're going to the ISS.
This is my only flight into space I'm ever going to have.
Yeah.
Right.
You're pretty stoked about going to the ISS.
Yeah. Okay.
And you've got a choice between going up in a kind of Dragon 2 type capsule.
Yeah. On a rocket.
Or on a Falcon 9 or whatever.
Yeah.
or you go up on a Skylon. Which one do you pick? Which is cooler?
Those are kind of two different questions, though.
Where you got to answer both of them.
Yeah. All right, that's fine. So the first one, is a space plane less scary? I think it might be. Because it's not going to be like sat on the pad, like fucking venting gas and
all the bits like
humming and vibrating and like just sort of looking a bit terrifying. A space plane's just going to be kind of chilling on a runway like a plane would be.
Yeah, get your headphones on, watch the movies.
Yeah, get your little bag of peanuts or whatever.
The hostess comes round.
Whereas a rocket, but there's something pretty awesome about getting strapped into a rocket.
That's the thing.
Like something, I don't know.
Yeah, there's something more kind of adventurous about being on a rocket.
Getting into a space plane is almost like, it's obviously not like getting into a normal plane because you're going into space and you'll be in like a spacesuit and it's all going to be like a spacecraft inside.
But you would be in a spacesuit.
Yeah, probably. But my point is that there will be something about it that feels much more sort of familiar, like you're getting into just a normal aircraft, whereas getting into a rocket is like a new experience, like something totally outside of anything you've done before.
And because there's no windows on the Skylon, isn't it? You're not going to be able to see anything.
Yeah, well, that almost just hands down wins the argument then, doesn't it? Because if you want to be able to see what's going on, although actually even in a rocket you probably won't get to see much out of those tiny windows unless you're sat right next to one.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know how much they see in things like Soyuz or whatever.
No.
It looks like they're pretty kind of like strapped back.
Yeah, although
you do see in the Dragon capsules, it's different potentially. Yeah,
probably bigger windows and stuff. But I think unless you're lucky enough to be the guy who's like sat right next to the window, which would be wicked.
When you get to the ISS, you're going to be able to look down through the different windows on there. So maybe that doesn't matter too much.
Maybe that doesn't matter too much. No. I wonder what that would feel like, the differences between the two, like whether you get more G or something on the space plane.
Well, maybe.
I don't know.
I don't know.
You'd imagine that the immediate acceleration of the rocket would be more.
Yeah.
Would you?
But a part of me thinks like there's something about because it's sort of pressed against it. That sort of like stomach drop feeling you get, like when it whooshes up.
Yeah, and then it kicks when the rocket engines kick in,
and it goes really up into like
fucking firing you into orbit.
That might feel kind of more extreme than just like a rocket's just almost like pressing you in one direction for the whole thing.
Yeah.
Ish.
I know what you mean. We're not talking from experience, but I know what you mean. Like like I reckon that actually a ride in a space plane would almost be more fun, just because you get the different stages of acceleration, the different stages of like ascent and everything. Because presumably your ascent starts off
and you might get some more
shallower and then gets steeper and steeper as you climb, possibly. And like the different stages of engines, they cycle through from the air breathing to the rocket engine stage. You just get that kick of acceleration.
And I wonder if you wouldn't because I think actually a lot of the astronauts said that the Soyuz is quite smooth now, but sometimes like rockets give a really bad like vibration.
Yeah.
And that could kind of be a bit annoying.
Maybe, but I agree. It's kind of part of the experience of it though, just like the sort of terrifying like. Just assault on your senses that a rocket launch would be.
Yeah, true. I suppose things like the Saturn V launches, I think, were really like vibration heavy.
They looked bad. I mean, I'm based.
I think I've heard that before though. About yeah.
I think you're right. The Soyuz,
So yeah.
But okay, but it's actually obviously not
the
the rocket
breathing. Which would you pick then? Which are you picking?
Which am I picking to ride into space? To ride into space, I reckon a space plane.
Okay.
For one single. Oh shit! I don't know. Because the other question, which is a valid question that you raised, is which is cooler, right? And that actually also matters for which one I'd rather go on. So which is just generally cooler, like a space plane? And this is a totally legit question, by the way.
Yeah.
Just pointing it out.
Yeah.
Which is
asked
more...
by many scientists and engineers over the world.
Yeah. Which is more badass, a rocket or a space plane? Hard question.
Well, a conventionally landing. I don't know. Which is cooler? Which is actually cooler? I mean, rockets are kind of. There's something cool about them being old school.
Yeah.
But there's also something not cool about them being old school.
There's something. I know.
There's something way more futuristic about a space plane.
Yes, there is. It feels like it's pushing things forward, even though it might not actually be as viable long term as rockets, so we don't know, as we've just been talking about. But there is something a bit more futuristic about spaceplane, I agree.
Yeah.
But there's just something about like a rocket, like a space plane, watching it take off and something. I mean, it would look fucking cool. I can't argue that it's not cool because it's clearly cool. But there's something about just watching it take off would be almost just like watching just a really super cool plane take off, like a Blackbird or something.
Yeah, but how cool is that?
It's fucking cool. But it's not like a rocket launch. Like, that thing is going into space, and that's what it's made for. That's what it looks like it's doing. You know, like just the energy and just the spectacle of a
But the space plane is more like a sort of sci-fi film.
I know what you're saying, and I agree. But to me,
a rocket's cooler.
Yeah. But then maybe a rocket's it's sort of a bit more stuck in the past, and what I should be thinking about is these futuristic, like.
That's just.
I don't know.
All the different things that go into defining something as cool.
Yeah, so that would feed back into cool. my reasons for choosing one over the other for my single flight into space. Ultimately, its safety would be the overriding thing.
I kind of think that, like we said earlier, it wouldn't be that different to get. For example, I mean, in the future, right? I mean, this is a bit of a tangent, but they're developing the Skylon engine, the Sabre engine.
Yeah.
Into another version of it would be the Scimitar engine.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that's like for this other, I think it's the A2 or something. It's like a hypersonic,
like a commercial passenger jet.
Yeah, and so even if the economics don't work out for the Skylon for going to low Earth orbit, potentially it's still going to have huge uses for using for commercial planes. Yeah, because like, somebody sort out a supersonic plane.
Yeah. Christ.
It's been so rubbish that Concorde disappeared. I know Concorde was kind of, maybe it should have disappeared, but it was tragic.
Yeah, but there's nothing to carry the beacon forward. No. We're just using the same. I mean, just updated versions of the same air travel that we've been using for like half a century.
Yeah, it's not been faster for a very long time.
No.
So I mean,
we're way overdue. Like a badass, super fast vehicle to hop around from continent to continent. Like, and it's suborbital, isn't it? Like the design for that thing is suborbital, so you'd be going really high.
I think so, but
so you'd be able to see the Earth as.
But it doesn't know Windows. But it will have.
Sort me out.
But it will have like LCD panels. But they said potentially, and like instead of Windows, they just have LCD panels. That are relay.
Well, that's sort of okay. But I'd rather it as a window so I can actually see with my eyes what was of the Earth.
Yeah, exactly.
The Earth as a planet underneath me.
Oh, that would be.
Can you imagine?
Just as like you're hopping over to New York, but you get to go in like a.
I wonder what the altitude actually is. I wonder what you would actually see, because it might not be.
It would probably. I think it would be pretty.
I mean, it's pretty high, but it's probably not as high as like the Kármán line, like Blue Origin rocket flights. I wouldn't.
No, probably, but I wouldn't be surprised if you would be able to see the curvature of the Earth.
Yeah, I'm sure you will.
You can see
and
that
like
in
the
like
darkness
a
of the
U2
sky
plane.
above you, that's space up there.
Yeah. Yeah, when it's going like hypersonic speeds, like Mach 4 or something, it would be really high up.
Yeah. So hopefully in our lifetimes we'll be having aircraft flights like that.
Yeah, but I that's a tangent, but it's related because I feel like that flight would feel how much different would that feel to a flight to the ISS on a space plane compared to a hypersonic plane, just the A2 or whatever.
Well, you get up to the altitude of that, and then the rocket engines would kick in.
And then they kick in. That's the thing. Anyway, which is cooler.
Yeah.
I could be convinced it's rockets, but I think it might be space planes for me.
All right, I'm gonna go with rockets. I think rockets are cooler.
Okay.
That's my opinion, which is the word of truth.
That's the end of it. Rockets are cooler.
Done.
Right.
Anyway,
on that note, let's move on.
Let's move on.
So forgetting flying into orbit on these different vehicles.
Yeah.
Potentially, we could just get the elevator.
Yeah, just press that button, wait for it to.
Bing. There's a little guy in
please.
there.
Orbit, please.
So a space elevator is a concept that's been around for a long time. Actually, was it talked about in the 19th century or something bizarre?
I think
like
so.
That?
Yeah. I think so.
Which is crazy.
Before they even really had the concept of rockets, I guess.
Yeah. It's a very old concept anyway, relatively. And it's very difficult, unfortunately, on Earth because...
it's a ridiculous structure for a start. It basically involves like tethering a giant counterweight to a huge cable that runs between like the surface of the Earth and this counterweight that's then pulled taut because of the tension of the counterweight.
Yes.
And then you run objects up and down like cars or carry whatever you want to call them, carriages or lifts or something, up and down.
Yeah.
Climbers are often called, up and down this cable, which can take days because this thing's the cable's going to have to be like tens of thousands of kilometers long, right?
Yeah,
for the physics of it to work properly.
Yeah, and you've got to get to somewhere. It's got to be way above the counterweight's got to be way above the point in which you want to stop at.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
And so it has to be extremely long.
It's got to be above geosynchronous orbit.
Which is pretty high
to keep the tension, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there'd be a point of the cable at which, like, you're at geosynchronous orbit, and if you let go of the cable there, you would just stay next to it in orbit around it. Because you're moving, so imagine you're just moving, or like, basically the cable's moving at the same speed as the Earth's rotation.
Yes.
So, like, underneath that point, you're in, like, either a highly elliptical orbit or just a suborbital speed, and you just fall back to Earth. Above that point, you'd be flung out, because you're on, like, the centripetal force, and you're being, like,
so you could use it then to launch yourself.
Yeah. You could depending on where you let go of the cable, you can put yourself in like trans-Mars injections and stuff like that, just by letting go of the cable, and that you're just using the Earth's rotation as your acceleration.
Yeah, like a slingshot.
Yeah, which is awesome.
Yeah, that is very cool. But the problem is, of course, the materials involved.
Yeah, it's ridiculous object.
Right, so that forgetting the counterweight, just for a cable to support itself that length, the weight of that cable is like, it's obscene. Obviously, it's that long. The weight of it can't support itself basically in any of the materials we have currently. For the one you would require.
Do you mean support itself like under its own weight, like on the Earth?
Like its own, or just hanging itself basically that length. I think it said that it would just snap just from the weight of the actual cable itself. Because I think
there'd be the most tension would be on that point at geosynchronous orbit, where
so it'd have to be thickest there.
Where it's being pulled in each direction, equally, basically. The gravity of Earth, like, pulling it that way.
Yeah, so if you didn't want to run stuff up and down it, I think if you just put the cable out in a certain part of the orbit, so that it was pulling on itself, but you wouldn't be able to run climbers up it, I think it would snap.
Oh shit!
Of it just from the weight of the cable, forgetting the counterweight, with every material we have at the moment. And obviously you need a counterweight and stuff to climb stuff up. I think that's how it works. Yeah. If it's wrong,
you could use an asteroid as a counterweight, though.
Yeah, people talked about that.
Yeah, and you could also use the asteroid as the raw material to build the cable. So you could park an asteroid in orbit around the Earth, and then build the cable down to the Earth from the asteroid.
That's nuts.
Yeah. So gradually, imagine that. It'd be gradually like coming through the atmosphere. You'd be able to suddenly to see
dangling.
It, and just be like a thing just dangling out of the sky. It'd look absolutely crazy, and it wouldn't be touching the ground.
It'd be whipping all over the place, though, wouldn't it?
I don't think so. Not necessarily.
From the winds and stuff.
Yeah, there'd be. Yeah, I guess it would have to be somehow weatherproofed.
Well, and once it's like tied down, it would be fine. But I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, but you'd have that problem either way, though.
You have to
build
catch
it up
somehow.
or built it down.
Yeah.
You'd always have that problem. Maybe the weight of it is just. I mean, it would be moving a bit with the wind, but I mean, it's the other end's tied to a giant asteroid. So, it's a crazy thought, isn't it?
So there are some ideas, right, of what types of other material we could use to build the cable,
like carbon nanotubes and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I think is Kevlar the strongest like type of kind of like line we can make, like Kevlar?
Is cables? It possibly like cheaply manufactured? Because carbon nanotubes obviously can be manufactured, but just not very.
Anyway, Kevlar's like a ready available material that we could potentially use to build something that long, but it's not strong enough. It would snap. Although, if you built a space elevator on Mars, Kevlar would do the job.
Would it? Shit.
And I think on the Moon as well. Obviously, that would make sense.
That's crazy. Is that just because of the gravity's like
because it's less gravity, it's got to go less distance, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Kevlar would be strong enough.
I'm
pretty sure I've read that.
Thing is with the Moon, though, is that the Moon's rotation is real slow. And so that means that geosynchronous orbit above the Moon is really far away.
Right.
So you need a super long cable, apparently.
That makes sense. Sure.
So it's sort of maybe not viable for the Moon, but it's different with Mars. Like, so the speed of rotation of the body that you're building it off of is like an important factor.
Yes.
I think how long the cable will end up being.
Yeah. So the other thing about carbon nanotubes, not only are they super strong, but you can also conduct electricity through them, can't you?
Yeah.
Which is
useful.
Which is basically like almost essential for things trying to climb up.
Because that's one of the big problems apart from materials. Is like, how do you power the things that are going up and down?
Yeah.
Like, without them having to carry a shitload of fuel, because otherwise, like, why would you? I mean, you might as well just use rockets If you haven't,
Sure.
if you know,
If you've got a rocket-powered climber,
yeah,
that's like, why don't you just
Right.
build a rocket?
yeah. So you want to be able to power them through the cable.
Yes.
So if you can conduct electricity through the cable, you don't have to then carry extra weight in the cable for cables, power cables.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's good. So carbon nanotubes could be a good way of
And
doing
they're super good at conducting stuff as well. If you build like, it's almost like a graphene, like carbon nanotubes are basically like rolled up graphene, aren't they? Some of them, like, I don't know. I think they are like then lots of different layers of that. But they're really good conductors.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they are. Yeah, that's right.
so
Yeah.
you wouldn't lose a huge amount of well, you would lose energy, but you wouldn't lose as much as you might think.
And so this is another way if you grab a meteorite, like a really carbon-heavy meteorite, asteroid, sorry,
Right.
and build your cable using the asteroid as the raw material. So you just like gradually extrude this thing from the asteroid. It's cool, isn't it?
Could you build one from like so the other, could you do between like two bodies?
Apparently, you could do it between two tidally locked bodies. So like Pluto,
like
Pluto and Charon or Charon or whatever is
yeah.
the moon. They're tidally locked to each other. So the same
They
face.
just point each other, yeah.
So you could put
But the moon's
together.
tidally locked to us. But
It
then
is,
we
but we're not
move.
tidally locked to the moon.
No, that's true.
So
No.
unless you had like the base of it on the Earth constantly moving at the same speed that
We
the
could have
Earth's
a ship.
rotating.
That's
Well, people talk about that anyway because one of the problems with it, especially around the Earth, is that it will just inevitably impact the orbits of other satellites. This cable,
right.
it's just gonna somehow like the maths work out that it just will hit things. So you have to be able to dodge things. So either you
So you have to keep moving the bottom around.
either you oscillate it at like a frequency that's like that will dodge stuff, so you know where everything
God,
is
this
and you
sounds
plan.
nuts.
Yeah, or you tie the bottom to a mobile thing like a ship. That's something people talk about. Plus, also with a ship, you dodge the problem of it being like in one country's territory.
Well, this is the other thing. Like a space elevator is going to make a huge like whoever builds that space elevator is going to be access to space is going to be more or less theirs and theirs alone in a way. Like it'd be so much cheaper than any other method. A space elevator, just like pinging stuff off.
Yeah.
The
amount of stuff you could lift as well, like in one go, and just be constantly ferrying back and forth.
Yeah.
I mean, suddenly like industry becomes like viable. I mean, we talked about this before, but just like you can imagine this thing
so
just like
cheap,
ferrying raw materials up and down the cable all the time, as well as people and robotic stuff, and it's just going to be be crazy.
It would just be such a long queue to get onto it.
Yeah.
Like wait times for it. So maybe actually you need to build a few of them.
Yeah, well, you'd imagine. Yeah.
I don't know how many like climbers you can have going up and down and stuff.
No.
And obviously, no one probably knows, but.
Yeah, and that actually matters for the physics of it because it's going to change the weight distribution on the cable and stuff. You want to make sure you try and balance climbers going up and down at the same time and all that kind of stuff.
Isn't there like a plan from the Japanese to build one?
Yeah, I've heard this. But
I don't know how serious a plan it is.
I mean, who knows? But they've said something like 2050, right?
Yeah, that's the date I heard. 2050, a space elevator. Mind you, aren't we supposed to have the singularity by then?
Yeah, I mean, Christ knows what's going to happen by 2050. If we've had the singularity,
then forget that. Don't
worry about this.
Yeah,
like all of these plans will go right out the window. We'll be doing whatever the AI wants us to do.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that in another episode.
We will indeed.
Possibly several other episodes.
Yes, I think that's a multi-episode topic, probably.
So one cool thing about cool thing to talk about, potentially bad thing about the space elevator is obviously like what is its chances of failure? What's its safety going to be like, and what happens if it breaks? Right, so you've made this thing out of carbon nanotubes, but that's not totally infallible. And you could imagine some event like being hit by a meteorite or something that's going to damage it, and it breaks.
Yeah, how do you get the climbers off?
Right, like
someone shoots it, someone like a terrorist attacks it or something. I mean, you'd have to have a pretty big bomb to break the like.
Yeah.
How thick's this thing gonna be?
Apparently, it's gonna have to be thicker at different levels as well.
Yeah, because that geosynchronous orbit's got to be thickest.
Yeah.
To break that though, like, it would be difficult probably. Obviously, it's one of those engineering things where you build in and minimize risk on by just engineering out that risk and having multiple redundancies in it.
Yeah.
But you've still got to account for obviously a total failure of the structure.
Yeah.
Would you what would happen to the asteroid? Nothing really.
I think the asteroid is going to be moving at faster than orbital velocity, right?
Yeah.
Because that's how it creates the tension.
Yes.
So the asteroid will be gone.
Just fling off.
And presumably the cable's just going to come down. If it breaks high up and the section that's moving slower than orbital velocity will fall. And if it's tens of thousands of kilometers long, it's going to wrap around the Earth.
Is that actually what would happen?
I
It's just
don't
sort
see
of
what
like a
else would
ball of
happen.
string, just sort of.
Yeah. I mean, what would that even look like coming down through the atmosphere?
Would some of it it wouldn't get fast enough to burn up?
Maybe it would. Maybe it would.
It might
presumably
not.
Presumably
might
the
it would
the
start as
furthest
soon
end
as
would
its
be
tension's gone. It would start falling back to Earth, right?
Yeah.
Oh God, I don't
But
know.
surely,
actually.
I mean, people might
I
have
don't
modelled
know.
this and stuff,
Yeah.
but you'd imagine that the furthest end, like the long end near the break, would be speeding up, as it's like the rest of it's dropping down, is gaining momentum from the rest of it. Maybe not. I don't know.
It's a crazy thing to think about.
I know. And like you draw a line around the Earth from wherever this base is, and it's going to be hitting stuff that's important. It's going to be like smashing into seas and stuff, probably.
It's not going to be. Yeah, but it depends how thick it has to be, the cable. I mean, because I imagine like two different things in my head for a space elevator cable. Something that's like sort of like something this sort of size, like a sort of, I don't know, as big as like a table or something.
Like a meter or two in diameter.
Yeah, or something that's like 100 meters in diameter, like a massive like structure that goes up into the clouds.
So I imagine somewhere between the two.
I don't really know what the people have talked about.
No, again, I don't. I think, obviously it has been talked about. It's probably quite easy to find that number. I just don't know it.
Yeah.
But I imagine something that on the order more of like 10 meters in diameter.
Okay.
So maybe it would just burn up a lot of it. I don't know. But it's something that could be potentially really, really devastating.
Yeah, you'd have to. Whatever way the Earth's rotating, you'd be able to probably model if it snapped at any point where it would fall.
And maybe you'd have like
I'll tell you
trigger
what,
points,
though.
like explosives on
no,
it, so
that's a
that
bad
you
idea.
could disconnect sections of it.
I was going to say that.
And so they fly off into space or something.
Half of it goes off with the asteroid or something.
Yeah.
You detect a failure and you like blow it up at the bottom and it gets dragged out of the atmosphere with the asteroid or something like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, how do the climbers get down?
Yeah. They've all got to have escape pods of some kind, I guess.
Like a parachute or
yeah.
something.
Or propulsively
But like they've
landing,
got to detach themselves.
Yeah.
So you have to like maybe explosive bolts or something to like get yourself away from the cable.
It's going to happen quite slowly. Like
Yeah.
relatively slowly, I think, because it's so big and because the distance has evolved, it's massive. So you'd probably have time to be like, okay, shit, we need to evacuate. Everyone get in the escape pods or whatever.
The escape pods, that's cool.
Yeah.
And obviously there'd be different. You'd have to have different methods of escape potentially, or where you just use the same one. That's like a sort of Dragon capsule type thing that can re-enter the atmosphere from anywhere at any point up in the thing. And
It'd be tricky for the people who are really high up the cable, who are above the geosynchronous orbit point, where they would be flung off into space. So they're already traveling faster than orbital velocity. They'd have to have
on their way to Mars,
fuel or something on board so they could change their, so they could come back to Earth. I don't know.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, surely if once you get above that point, then you've got to have some kind of orbital correction system to burn your way back down, and then you've got to like calculate a route down. It's got to be, obviously all be like automatically done for you and ready and prepared and
none of this like planning for weeks before or your trajectories and stuff. The computer's just got to sort you out on the fly.
It's got to land you somewhere quickly. That's a way. It's also got to know like where the cable's falling, where it's broken, all these types of things. If you're attached above the cable and the cable's like being dragged out into space by the asteroid, you've got to like get off that as it's like flinging itself out. And there's so many different things to consider.
But by that point, you'd expect that like flying around in space and all that's involved in that would be so routine and so like so we'd have it so down that it would be like, okay, now we're adrift. We've just got to sort this out, and the computer will just be sorting you out with everything, like calculating all the trajectories and the burns and stuff you have to do to get home. Maybe there might be space stations in orbit and stuff that you can go and dock with, like little like lifeboat sort of places to go and refuel or whatever. Land on the moon, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool to think about.
Oh, yeah. That's the thing. If we had a space elevator, it would imply that we are in space. Like we have industry in space. There's people.
Yeah, a space elevator.
People in space.
Mars
Loads
and
of people.
Earth. kind of you just that's just crazy. It's just stuff so
It's
easy to get up and down. Imagine what a space elevator looks like, going to the base of one, like driving up to the base of one, and it's just like is it going to be? Yeah, it's the thing. We don't have the thickness. I swear, in like
from a distance, it would just look like a thread, just like from over the horizon or something, just stretching off into the sky.
I swear, in a Call of Duty game, which I haven't played, but I saw a photo of. There's like a level where there's like a space elevator, and you can go to like the bottom of it. And I'm pretty sure the photo, it looks obviously, I don't know if Call of Duty is accurate on this or whatever, probably not, but it just looks like a colossal kind of tower thing almost, that just like going up into the clouds.
I kind of imagine the climbers as well. Like, you imagine you get close to this thing, you see one coming out of the base terminal thing at the bottom.
Yeah.
And I imagine a climber to be sort of the size of like a small building, just like stuck on the side of the cable, just moving up, and it's counterbalanced by another one coming down at the same rate at the same time.
Yeah.
Just like a giant. You could hold like hundreds of people in it, or like tons and tons of payload or whatever in one of these things. I really hope this happens.
Yeah.
It seems like it's crazy. It's a crazy thought, but it's not too crazy. I mean, we need a lot of materials science.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
We need to be able to manufacture on a scale we've never ever even considered doing before.
Yeah.
And maybe like something like asteroid mining is going to be like one of the catalysts, sort of.
We said it, obviously, the space elevator, would make a huge difference to the economy of wherever it's built and the global economy. But it would probably have to be a joint project between multiple countries.
Of course.
But it would still have to be housed in one location, obviously. Well, maybe not with a ship or
maybe not with a ship, but I feel like a ship there's not enough redundancy. What happens if the ship sinks?
Well, it'd be more like a floating island, wouldn't it? It'd be like a monster.
Yeah. Seems a bit, I don't know.
It should be.
You'd have to be able to get
large that like weather doesn't make any difference to it and stuff like that.
But getting people and equipment and things to the ship, I mean, it just seems like an extra level of.
Sure.
Whereas you could build like real infrastructure to ship things to the base of a space elevator if it's in like, I don't know.
Tokyo.
Yeah. Although you wouldn't near the equator.
Ah, good point. Yeah.
I think it just gets a bit complicated if you have it away from the equator.
Yeah. That makes sense, I think, yeah.
So as well as a space elevator,
there's
loads of other ideas that include like these kind of tethers or cables, but they don't actually necessarily have to be as long or like fixed to the ground, fixed to an asteroid or whatever. Yeah. Like, so skyhooks is one of the things people have been talking about.
Yeah, so I've heard of that, and it sounds a little bit to me like, have you seen The Dark Knight?
Yeah. Yes,
you know, it's called, which is called Skyhook in The Dark Knight.
Is it?
I'm pretty sure
Possibly.
It's called Skyhook.
It might be, yeah.
And he just like puts a little balloon up, and the plane comes over,
catches him,
and that was a real thing.
Yeah, they actually
Fulton systems, they were designed.
Yeah.
Back in the day as a potential way to evacuate like personnel from, hot zones.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's a bit like that.
Yeah.
In it sort of.
But it's to get into space, right? So
yeah,
it has like, what does it have? Like a big cable hanging down from.
Yeah, there's a big cable hanging down from like an object that's orbiting orbital velocity, and the cable is like hanging down into the upper atmosphere.
Yeah.
So there's like two types. There's like rotating and non-rotating. There are non-rotating ones. You just have this cable hanging down into the upper atmosphere, and you launch like your supersonic, but suborbital aircraft at it, and then you attach your payload to the bottom of that cable. And then that uses that to drag it into orbit. Essentially, that's a non-rotating one.
Okay.
Then the rotating ones,
it's rotating.
The cable's rotating, the whole thing. So like, it's orbiting, but it's also rotating. So one end of it drops down into the atmosphere, and that basically means that it's traveling it's traveling at a much slower relative speed to the ground than the one that's just screaming.
If you get it right,
in orbit.
it's like going with it, and so it almost stops.
Yeah, it's just. Yeah, it's some arc that basically means that at the point that it's its lowest, the end of that cable, it's almost stationary with respect to the ground.
So then you hook something to it.
Then you hook something to it at that moment, and then
with some high altitude thing. Or
whatever. You have to launch like a plane or something, like a real high velocity or high altitude plane.
So you've already got the problem of getting an air breathing plane to lift up whatever object this is, but then it's got to be a fast. Well, if it's rotating, then.
Although with the rotating ones, there's still a relative speed to the ground. It's not actually like stationary.
No, but it's nowhere near as fast though.
It's nowhere near as fast.
Mach something to catch up with it.
Yeah. But it's still fast.
Is it?
Even with the rotating one, it's still like Mach.
So you need a hypersonic plane potentially.
Yeah, like the non-rotating ones, you have to go to like Mach 15 or something ridiculous. Whereas these ones, it would be like Mach Mach 5 or something.
Okay, so like
it's
skyline territory.
Yeah, it's still fast. You still need to be going real fast. But then once you're stuck on the bottom of it, then you just climb up it like you would
Oh, you climb up it?
Yeah, like you would
or you just stay on the end and get like swung in.
Yeah, with the rotating one I think you just get swung into orbit. But with the non-rotating one I think you have to climb it like because it doesn't do anything. It's just orbiting the Earth as a cable. Just a really weird thought. Yeah, it has to be like super heat resistant and stuff, a bit that's sticking in the atmosphere. And like,
why would that have to be super heat resistant?
Well, because it's sticking into the atmosphere, moving at ridiculously high speeds.
Oh, because it's like hit. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
some part of it's moving
friction.
really fast.
Yeah.
That seems nuts.
Yeah, it's a nuts idea. But apparently the sort of physics of it check out.
Yeah, sure. I don't know anything about that particularly, but
I mean, it's been talked about as an idea.
Yeah, obviously it's just hypothetical.
Yeah.
It's not been taken as seriously, as far as I can tell, as
a space elevator.
Which
is crazy when you think about what a space elevator is.
Yeah, well, there seems to be more talk and more sort of plans and more just general buzz about space elevators than these skyhook things, as far as I can tell from just having a bit of a read around stuff. I mean, it's, maybe that's not true.
A skyhook's like the non-rotating kind, or at least sort of like halfway between a space plane and a space elevator, because you kind of need both. Well, not a space plane, but you need a high altitude hypersonic
jet thing
plane, as well as having your cable. So it's a bit of both. Whereas a space elevator, you're going full on for the whole structure, like
just
big cable
it up.
thing. Yeah,
it's an interesting idea.
Yeah,
sure.
And there's plenty more sort of structure-based ways of getting into space people have talked about, and they get nuts.
Yes,
they get absolutely.
I've
crazy.
heard of a few of them.
Okay, before we dive into the nut stuff, let's start with the kind of less crazy but still a bit crazy ones. That Canadian company Thoth.
Oh yeah.
Right. Have recently secured like a patent.
Yes.
For what they call a space elevator, which isn't really a space elevator. It's just a really, tower, really high tower.
Right.
Like 20 kilometers or something. High tower.
Okay, that's
not that high.
That's really high.
I mean, it's really high for a tower.
That's like 20 times the size of the Burj Khalifa.
Yeah.
Well, more than that. Actually.
Yeah, I mean,
Burj Khalifa is like what, 850 or something like that, 870 meters.
It's a beast of a thing.
So that's huge. That's absolutely what.
And it's got a stand under its own weight.
Oh, is this the inflatable thing?
Yeah.
So it's sort of.
So unlike a space elevator, where you don't need to support the weight of the cable on the ground because the whole thing's like self-support, it's tensile, so the asteroid at one end or the counterweight at one end.
It's like extensional rather than compressional or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Whereas this is it's just got to be able to sit on its own weight, so it's all inflatable and stuff like that.
So they pump it with presumably like super light gases in. Like
gas,
hydrogen, helium probably.
Yeah, but they've actually secured the patent to build the patent for it, which doesn't really mean anything. It just means that they.
Wouldn't you have to have like super strong? No, maybe not. Like very lightweight and strong, inflatable things to kind of have balloons at that altitude that don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. They've secured a patent to do it, right?
Yeah, so they have, and the point of it is that you have like a runway on the top, and you launch space planes from the runway.
So you get you winch the space planes up?
Yeah. Winch space planes up, all the equipment or people or whatever you want to take into orbit, you winch to the top of this tower, and then they launch these orbital planes, the orbital vehicles from the top of the tower, and because you're already 20 kilometers, you don't need to go through the thickest, like densest part of the atmosphere.
Yeah, which is always the worst bit, right?
Yeah. And apparently that it reduces your fuel requirements like 30%. No. 70% from chemical rocket launches. So you save 30% of fuel. It's huge, but
I mean, you've got to build a 20 kilometer high structure, inflatable structure. Can that survive like storms and stuff? Presumably, it can survive. You can't build. Obviously,
it's got to. It absolutely has to.
Yeah,
right?
it must.
Otherwise,
you would have thought they'd build it. Yeah, of course it would have to.
I mean, they obviously think that it's the answer to the world's problems.
Yeah,
of space.
Up to like hurricanes, it would have to survive.
Yeah.
Or anything, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine? Okay, so imagine this tower exists. What would it be like if you stood on top of it? Would you be able to see the curvature of the Earth?
Yeah.
From 20 kilometers. Yeah. Surely.
It'd be.
Wait, what is 20 kilometers in miles? Like
miles.
15?
Sure,
12, maybe?
Something like that. Yeah.
Somewhere between 12 and 15.
Yeah.
How high do commercial jets fly?
Well, I thought like 30,000 feet.
What's that? I think it's like 6 miles.
Oh. Okay, so it's twice that.
Yeah. Okay, so you probably would see.
Yeah, you would.
It would look awesome.
Yeah, so it's twice at 60,000 feet, and I think things like U2s, you can see the curvature of the Earth, and they fly around 60, 70, 80,000 feet, something like that. So you would be able to see the curvature of the Earth, you would think.
Yeah.
Or at least a slight curvature.
You could, like, base jump off of it.
Oh, someone would probably do that.
Yeah.
How high did that guy in the balloon go? The red
like 100 and something thousand feet.
Oh, Jesus, right.
It was mental.
Yeah.
And like the Joseph Kissinger, was it? The guy before that in the 60s that had the record was like 90-something thousand, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Or maybe even 100.
So above that.
Yeah. I think, it's higher. But yeah, I mean, they look like... The Red Bull guy, what's his name?
Can't remember.
I can't remember. He
but
the videos that...
B.
Baumgartner.
Yeah.
Felix Baumgartner.
Yeah, that's it.
So the videos of that, he looks like he's just jumping from space. Yeah. Like, that's what it looks like. Yeah. Imagine that.
That's absolutely terrifying. When this is a tangent again, but when you see him disappear, he goes, like, out of view so quickly.
Yeah, and apparently there's no sensation of falling.
Oh, because there's no air, hardly.
Yeah.
But doesn't he have, like, that like acceleration?
Yeah, you must have that sensation of falling. I remember reading something from Joseph. Is it Joe? The Kissinger guy.
Yeah. Is it Kissinger or Kittig? Anyway, yes, the other guy who had the record before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you must have some sensation of falling because before that you're basically going up in a balloon and then you jump out. So you must have some sensation of falling, but there's no rushing air.
Yeah.
You're just like, it's just all still.
Well, he just started
silent.
spinning, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. Yeah.
Like crazy. Yeah. So maybe people jump off this giant tower. That's not going to be the main use of it.
No.
Would you? That's the question. Though. Could you ever do like a tourist trip up to the top of it? Maybe. Like, is there like a restaurant at the top? You know, like like a sky deck.
Yeah.
You just sit as like a hotel at the top.
Presumably, I mean, if they'll probably run trips up there.
You might have to stay up there for a while waiting for your flight to arrive. Or
the top of it's all built in with like accommodation and.
It must be hard to maintain and sort out aircraft at the top of that.
Yeah. You need so much equipment up there.
Yeah.
At the top of this tower, which is like an inflatable tower. I mean, obviously it's going to be built strong enough to hold the weight up, but I mean, I've got to be honest.
Yeah.
Knowing very little about this at all, it doesn't seem very likely. We'll see.
70% reduction. It's going to be like
30% reduction.
Right. Okay.
It reduces it to 70%. The requirements for
right
launches. Sorry, I say that in a stupid way. It's a 30% reduction of fuel.
That seems like. I mean, that's significant.
It's still a lot. It's still a hell of a lot. Yeah.
It depends how much it costs to build. It's going to cost like a couple of billion or something, at least more than that probably. I don't know how much tall towers cost. Be a lot. I mean, it won't be as much as a space elevator, but you've got to wonder if people would think that's ever worth it for 30% reduction in fuel when you. Well, it's not if you do the maths and it works out being worth it. You get your payback over a certain period of time. If there's enough launches going, then maybe.
Even if you might find that rockets get to a point where they're really reliable and reusable, and space planes are also in flight and reusable and great. But then this thing still manages to just have a margin over them. So and then in that case, it will get built. Yeah,
which will be like easily the highest structure in the world.
Yeah.
by miles.
Literally by miles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless we have like huge vertical cities by that point.
Yeah.
Well, who knows?
Maybe inflatable skyscrapers.
Yeah.
So there are more crazy versions.
Oh yeah.
To get into space. So that's kind of I would say that's not that. That's fairly conventional idea.
Yeah, it's just build a really really high tower.
There are real outside the box like nuts.
Yeah,
things.
like dynamic structures. This whole like umbrella term of things that are really really big structures, and part of the way that they hold themselves up is through kinetic energy. So Space Fountain is like one of the classic ones that I talk about.
Now I've heard of it. And it's got some sort of stream of particles that goes up, right? Yeah. That keeps something in orbit. How does it work?
Not in orbit, but it's like a really high tower again, which at the top of which you could have at like an orbital height, at like either just like below, either just really really high out of Earth's atmosphere where you can launch things into orbital velocity from, or you could make it as high as a space elevator, and put something in geosynchronous orbit from the top of it.
So it's just but isn't there like a stream of...
Sorry, geostationary orbit is the word. Geostationary orbit, geosynchronous, yeah, it means the same thing. But anyway, carry on. Yeah.
The stream of particles though, can it get like... I thought it's not. It's two. I thought there were two structures involved in it, like one where the particles go up and one they come down, or something like that.
Yeah, basically.
Okay. So how does it work then?
So the concept of it, imagine you can imagine you have like a hose, a water hose. This is just the concept of it, right?
Yeah.
The way that the concept works. Have like a water hose.
I've got a hose.
And you're firing it into the air.
Right.
And you have like a board or like a plate or something that's tied in the corners to the ground. If you are accurate enough and you have a constant stream of water, you can hold that board up.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a cool idea.
So that's it. That's what a space fountain is.
What's the particles made of?
I don't know. Just like some. So the way that it works, you have these magnetic particles that you accelerate using super powerful like electromagnets through like a vacuum tube. You accelerate them up to the top, and then the kinetic energy is transferred into the top of the structure where they're bent back round and then fed back round towards the ground.
So it's a big fat magnet.
Yeah, basically. But the kinetic energy of them travelling upwards is what holds the thing up.
Is that okay.
It's just like constant game of like keepy uppies, just like keep it up.
But how does the kinetic energy get trapped? Because it's not hitting into it, presumably.
No, it's just through them.
So it must be a magnet.
It's a magnet.
Travels around it and that keeps it
They're
up.
bent using a magnet, which then takes the kinetic energy is transferred upwards into that magnet.
That's nuts.
Yeah, and then again, like a space elevator or whatever, then you can just run climbers up and down it.
What climbing what?
The outside of this stream of particles of like projectiles right, the stream of projectiles will be inside like a tube contained by magnetic fields, and on the outside of that you could have your climbers and things climbing up and down or whatever.
Oh right, okay. So the actual structures themselves are held up by the magnetic things as well.
It's just a way of getting around the fact that you can't build over a certain height, towers just become too weak to hold themselves up under their own gravity, under their own weight.
So the compressor stresses.
So this is a way of getting around that. You just fire stuff really hard at the top of it to keep it up. That's mental.
That's a cool idea. I like that a lot. But obviously, I mean, a space elevator is one thing. That sounds mental.
I mean, it's just so much can go wrong with it. Like the fact that you need a constant supply of extremely high power to keep it up.
Oh shit, the power, all the backup generators are dead, or the particles of whatever, something's happened to them.
Yeah.
That massive magnet's just gonna
fall. It's gonna fall. Yeah, it relies on the constant stream of particles.
It'd be like that in Independence Day where the giant city killing ship just
smashes into the ground. Apparently it would take ages for it to fall though, because there'll be so much kinetic energy in it that it wouldn't just immediately all the particles would stop. It would just continue.
It would have some sort of
screaming around for a while, and it would take ages to fall. So you could probably evacuate it, but it would be a lot of money just disappearing.
Well, that's a cool idea.
It's a cool idea. And there's another similar one called a launch loop.
Okay, I don't know anything about that.
So launch loop it's not a stream of particles this time. Instead, you have like a looped chain almost, right?
Okay.
And if you run a chain at really high velocity, it arcs up one side of it. So if you can contain one end, apparently, so you can contain one end, and then just in the direction that it's running really fast, it'll arc up. So you can have this thing running. It would describe like a parabolic curve.
Oh, right. Okay.
That then the top of which is in orbit essentially, or orbital altitudes.
So it's a similar dynamic structure.
It's a similar dynamic structure.
By kinetic energy.
Exactly, and it's just kinetic energy is what's keeping it up. And if it was to lose power, it would fall, probably with devastating consequences. That's the thing with all these things; they have so much energy going into them that if there was some kind of failure somewhere along that chain, all that kinetic energy is going to go somewhere, probably back into the ground.
Just cuts the Earth in half, like an egg.
But people are saying that you could get if you could build one of these things, you could reduce costs of getting mass into orbit down to between $300 and $3 per kilo.
Whoa!
I know.
That's mad cheap. $3 per kilo.
Yeah, it's dirt cheap.
The Skylon was.
I could pay to put some stuff in orbit
per kilo. Yeah, it's I think the Skylon's one of the predictions was $650 per kilo.
I mean, that is ridiculous compared to rocket prices. Ridiculously cheap.
Yeah, but
how does it compare to SpaceX's projected reusable rocket payload cost?
That's somewhat comparable, I think. The reusable is a totally different tangent.
That's fine.
I think as they said, like between 5 and 7 million. Gwyn Shotwell may have said that at some point. 5 to 7 million for a launch.
Yeah.
I don't know quite how that. I'm pretty sure that stacks up as actually possibly being a bit less.
Yeah.
Than $650 per. But anyway, So that launch loop thing.
Yeah.
It's like
could potentially be cheap, but obviously building. I mean,
Whatever
it
the
goes
hell,
back to the same old problems of like, where's the material going to
Yeah.
come from? Blah blah blah. Like, how the hell are we going to build one of these things?
Yeah.
And the fact that it just seems crazy to have both of those ideas, having a structure that's maintained purely through this kinetic energy is what holds it up. Like, that seems mental.
Yeah, no, it does seem a bit nuts. It's kind of like juggling. Like, eventually...
It's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eventually something's going to come down.
Yeah. Unless maybe something like revolutions in power, like fusion power or something, will make this kind of thing become less like sci-fi and more
maybe
more realistic. I don't know.
Well, just with the amount of electromagnetic energy you need.
Yeah, constantly supplying it and redundant. You could maybe be cheap and easy to have redundancies and things. Yeah. You need so many redundancies to have these things working.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Another thing that leads
backups and backups and backups.
Oh yeah. So another thing that leads on from them is this idea of an orbital ring, which is another dynamic structure.
Right.
So this is basically like having, so you have like a cable or a chain or even just like a stream of particles orbiting the Earth in a ring. So let's forget the stream of particles because it's easier to imagine it like a ring, like a cable.
What about like a hula hoop that you like roll around your waist?
Sure, like that. Rolling around the Earth, except in a totally circular orbit.
Yes.
But it's moving faster than the required orbital velocity. So there's like extra force, extra kinetic energy,
right, in
the cable.
Yes.
That is required to maintain its orbit.
But it maintains its orbit because it's kind of holding on to itself.
Yes.
It's only a certain size.
Exactly. But you can then put stations around it that that stay there through, magnetically or something. So they're not touching the cable, and they can be used to accelerate the cable and stuff like that as well. It's like looped like ring stations or something around the cable at different points, which, because they can use this extra kinetic energy created by the extra velocity to hold themselves up. So they're not orbiting, and if the ring just disappeared, they just fall to Earth.
Right.
But they're held there by this fast rotating thing.
Yeah.
And then you drop cables from them to the surface of the Earth.
Oh, so they're like space elevators. It's just that it's not held up by...
So it doesn't need to be anywhere near as long as a space elevator.
Oh, really?
It could be low Earth orbit.
Ah, that's cool.
And then you have a ring,
but
ring-shaped space station in low Earth orbit.
You just need to build a sort of ring structure that's the circumference of the Earth.
Yeah, more than that.
Yeah.
And apparently these things you can process them, so they don't have to be over the equator. You could like move it. So you can move it all around the entire world, and like any like meridian, any line around the Earth, you could put it. So you could essentially move it around and service anywhere on the Earth.
Because you have multiple ones, so it's like sort of racked up. That would look awesome.
You can, and people talk about them.
It's like a mega stress, like a Dyson, bordering on like a Dyson sphere type.
It's exactly
object.
what it is, and people talk about using them in this way, like building like a planet, like an artificial planet above the surface of like Jupiter or something like that, right? At a distance at which the gravity would be one Earth gravity. The whole thing is built on top of these orbital rings, which are moving fast enough. They're basically, the kinetic energy again is keeping everything up, and you build like a system of plates on top of these things above the surface of something like Jupiter. People talk about
like this. Round Jupiter, you've got this
encasing Jupiter. You wouldn't have to do the whole planet. You could just do like a ring or like patches of it, like built on top of these things, and gradually fill them in, and just like end up with this ball of.
That's absolutely nuts.
It's crazy shit.
That's cool though.
I think
the
most
concept of it. I like the. Yeah, obviously that's like far-flung Dyson sphere sort of future stuff.
Yeah.
But. The concept of like having a rotating structure in orbit that's kind of keeping itself out is quite a cool idea.
It's cool. It's hard to get your head around. It's hard to like kind of imagine exactly how that would work.
Yeah, of course.
But you could do it with a stream of particles like a space fountain in like an enclosed tube that are moving faster than orbital velocity. Again, that would do the same thing, just like transferring that energy. It doesn't need to do that to hold itself up, but then you can. The point is you mount things on it, like space elevators or something.
Yeah.
That use that energy to stay up.
Yeah. Wonder if you could detect. I suppose that would be quite thin though. It's not going to be that thick. The ring itself, right? Well,
yeah, I don't know. I don't really know.
I was wondering if it's like something you could detect from like a distance with some sort of fancy telescope.
For like
orbital
an
rings. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, people talk about detecting Dyson spheres around stars, but that's different because obviously they're much bigger.
Maybe if someone's built like one of these artificial planets around like a brown dwarf or something, you'd be able to detect it.
And you get all your heat from that as well.
Yeah.
It's just like build a giant.
Yeah, you just on the inside of it, it's like a Dyson sphere, and the outside of it's your habitat.
Yeah. It's like underfloor heating.
Yeah.
But like fancy.
Imagine that. Like you're just you essentially live on a planet which feels like something like the Earth. But you know that under your feet...
It goes on forever, like kind of... Yeah,
it's much bigger.
Massive.
Unbelievably big.
You had to like deconstruct planets to make this thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like dismantle like the matter of a solar system. Well, maybe not quite, but
not far
lots
off.
of it. And
to get around a brown dwarf, like, and a safe distance from it and all that.
Yeah. But you know that underneath your feet is like a star.
Well, underneath our feet is a extremely hot core.
Yeah.
It's not
true. It's not a star, though.
It's not a star. No, that's okay. I like that.
It's cool.
I like that. That's a very far-flung feature.
It's very far-flung. It's very science fiction. I think everything I just described has basically come from the guy who came up with the idea. Not came up with the idea, but developed the idea of the orbital ring and like how it would actually work and the physics of it and stuff. Also, then went on to talk about all this stuff about building artificial planets on top of Jupiter and stuff. So it's all kind of come out of this guy's sort of imaginings. But it's worth chatting about because it's a bit mad.
Yeah. So we've just been talking about also like majorly far-flung future stuff.
Yeah.
Let's take it back a bit.
Okay.
Because maybe we should talk about this earlier, but whatever. Guns. What happens what if we could fire stuff into orbit?
Just shooting stuff into space.
This is a thing that was legitimately researched for quite a while.
Yeah, a bit like nuking stuff into space.
Yeah, although...
Can't do that. Let's just shoot it instead.
Well,
which is basically what the space fountain is. But yeah, carry on.
Yeah, it's not actually, it's not. Well, it is very dissimilar, but it's like a much more basic approach where you basically get like a large artillery piece. The most basic approach is like a very large standard artillery piece that blasts a projectile that contains like a satellite into orbit from the ground.
You need a big gun.
You need a massive gun. It's like a super gun.
A super gun.
Yeah, that's the
hyper gun.
That's a legit word. And so they actually tried to do this back in the day with a project called Project HARP.
Right. Not double A. HAARP. Or is it
HARP?
Okay.
So it's not that whatever that weather thing is that some people go nuts about.
Love that stuff.
Yeah, I know, it's good. No, it was basically a project to try and make a space gun by this guy called Gerard Bull, and he was kind of like he's a pretty interesting character. It was like a very successful kind of artillery engineer, but he was obsessed with like building a space gun. And you can actually, and they actually came up with like a design for it. And
was it called a space gun?
I can't remember the actual name of the actual gun.
No, it's definitely now called a space gun.
Yeah, I think that was the point of it.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to get as high at altitude as they possibly could with it, and they've still got the record for the highest altitude shot, which is like 100 kilometers, something like that. I can't remember.
Decent. That's Kármán line territory. That's Blue Origin territory. 100 kilometers.
Yeah, I think it actually might be more than that, nearly 200. But
smashed it.
But they basically had to abandon the project because it got lost funding and stuff. It was back in like the 60s or 70s. And the gun is still in Barbados. It's still there, rusting. You can go see it.
How big is it?
Big.
Like,
but not as big as some of the ones that he then later tried to build.
Right.
So this guy went to Iraq and to get funding from Saddam Hussein to build like a space gun. And he built like howitzers and stuff for Saddam Hussein that were better than the howitzers that the Allies had. So he was becoming like a sketchy guy because he wanted to build this space gun, but he was going to like crazy people to do it.
So whoever would give him the money,
basically. And another project he started developing was called Project Babylon, which was and Babylon's old Iraq.
Yeah.
And I think in Syria as well. I can't remember exactly. And he basically ended up planning to build this gun that would have been eventually big enough potentially to shoot shells from Iraq into like Israel. And so the Mossad assassinated him in Belgium. Obviously it's not like confirmed, but
that's basically what
everyone knows that's what happened.
That's mental. I've never heard about this before.
Yeah. What a like crazy life.
Yeah. So we could have had a space gun if it wasn't for the assassination.
Well,
Saddam Hussein might have had a space gun.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, I think the maths works out that you could potentially do it, but obviously there's problems. But he really believed in the idea.
Yeah.
It would just have to be a colossal piece of kit.
Yeah.
There's still, and the Project Babylon, the gun like pieces from that are still like lying around. You can go and visit. I think they're in a museum somewhere, possibly in Iraq. I don't remember. But yeah, so there's a cool anecdote attached to that. But more modern that we're probably not going to use like a sort of standard artillery piece now.
Yeah, like a massive tank.
Just driving around blasting satellites. But potentially you could use like an electromagnetic like railgun or coil gun.
Yeah.
Which is almost like use that as like a long run, like a runway kind of thing, where you just like speed it up and up and up like a maglev. Yeah. Just fly it off.
I remember there was talk 10 years ago, 15 years ago in the news. I remember reading about the ideas to have like sort of like the same idea as like a particle accelerator, like a giant circular.
Oh, is that a launch loop?
Possibly.
Anyway,
but it was like an electromagnetic, kind of like a railgun idea. We have like a maglev vehicle that gets accelerated around. The launch loop's that thing I was talking about. That's like kinetic structure.
Anyway, yeah, okay.
This is just a giant railgun, but you have like a circle to accelerate to ridiculously high speeds, and then you get fired off out the top of it.
Yes.
And they're going to build it into like a mountain or something. It's pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so the top of it would stick out the top of this mountain.
Yeah. So you could you just use like electromagnetic energy, like you would in a maglev train to shoot something up.
Yeah.
But you could also do like hybrid systems. Right. So you have like a space plane that gets launched off an electromagnetic rail, which gets it through like a good part of the atmosphere, and then it like lights up some ram engines or whatever, or wherever, I don't know, whatever speed it's at, and then goes off into space.
That sounds like a pretty good idea.
Yeah, I think that does sound like a reasonable idea, because then it's almost like that tower bit is like the tower, the extra atmosphere you get through is just energy you put in on the ground.
Yeah. And with all the benefits that being on the ground gives you, like infrastructure access and
obviously
stuff.
There's the problem though of acceleration speed.
It's a huge amount of power.
Yes, a huge amount of power. If you want to put a human crew in it, you need like a super long like rail runway to get it up to like a mad speed in the very low atmosphere, which is going to get it like super hot, then you've got to launch it off. So maybe it's a bit of a mad idea.
Is it a bit defunct then because of these problems?
I think there's ideas and talk about it, but nothing. I think there's only for like major funded projects. I mean, there are for like railguns and things, sure.
Yeah.
Like for like ship-mounted weapons and stuff.
Fucking cool.
in an awful sort of but cool way.
I mean, they themselves. Yeah, in the same way that a jet fight is cool. I mean, obviously the applications of it are probably terrible.
Could be horrible.
Could be horrendous. But they themselves, as like a piece of tech.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
Cool. And adapting that for getting into space.
Yeah.
Would be awesome. Imagine what it would feel like just strapping yourself into like a railgun, basically a giant railgun.
Yeah, with for a human crew, like a human rated one.
Yeah.
Well, you imagine they'd have to do the acceleration at like a pace that wasn't going to make you just be sick every time. But those like roller coasters that like launch you really fast.
Yeah.
Like like Stealth at Thorpe Park or whatever.
Superman the Escape. Yeah. Six Flags in California.
Yeah.
There's loads of them.
That like one in Abu Dhabi, the like Ferrari one that's like the fastest one.
Yeah.
Like that, basically like that for a very long, like extended period of time.
Yeah.
But you could satellites though, like that didn't have particularly delicate parts, or you could build in cover for them. Build in, engineer out weaker parts. You could launch them. You could launch them in a railgun potentially.
Yeah. So maybe it's something that would be beneficial for like unmanned missions. Yeah. Rather and for manned missions, you keep it to rockets and space planes and stuff.
What about that Thoth tower with like a massive railgun on top, and it's just like blasting stuff into orbit, just turning and firing stuff in like different orbits. You could have the ramp, like the electromagnetic rail going up to it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I don't know why you'd have that though, because then when you get to the top of it, then you're already moving really fast. What's the point in having the tower?
It's just a way of
keeping it up,
keeping it being accelerated up the tower. If you
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So like still getting energy gained as it goes up, rather than like losing it as soon as it leaves the.
I've seen people talk about having like maybe not a railgun, but some kind of like space gun type thing. Suspend like really, if it has to be really long, suspending it with balloons. So that you have it like the required angle, but it's really, really, really long. Obviously, you don't want to have it supporting its own weight. So you have balloons holding it up along its entire length.
Right.
Which seems like a stupid idea. Because then what happens if you lose a balloon?
Yeah. Who knows? But anyway, I think so. Is there anything else? Any other methods we haven't really covered? I'm sure there are probably a few. I think we talked about that for long enough now.
Yeah. I like it though. I like shooting stuff into space is a good way to end it all.
Yeah. Why not?
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, so I guess we'll see in the next few years with things like Skylon, the more near-term things. We'll see how they develop. Maybe it will change space. Maybe actually some of the more conventional technology will.
Out of all the crazy stuff we've spoken about, so not really including like space planes and all that, but like structures. And maybe guns. Yeah. What would you like to see the most? And
what would I like to see?
Yeah, like what do you think would be the coolest thing?
Like an orbital ring, right?
Yeah,
because that's the most far-flung future.
Yeah, or maybe a space elevator. But then that is a sort of space elevator.
It's
anyway.
like multiple space elevators potentially.
Yeah. What do you think is the most likely though of all the stuff we've been chatting about? The crazy stuff.
Probably that Thoth thing, but I imagine a space elevator's. I imagine a space elevator's probably like that. Seems like a very far future, but potentially. Like something worth it that people that governments, lots of governments would think about investing in when space becomes commercially important. Yeah,
exactly. And I don't understand like the economics of the Thoth thing enough.
No,
Thoth is a really annoying word to have to say. The Thoth thing, that thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I can't. As soon as you have like a fleet of reusable rockets or space planes that are just pumping up and down all the time, like taking stuff. I don't see a 30% reduction in fuel from what we currently use. Is it worth it?
Maybe not. But
maybe not. Yeah. So out of all the
space elevator
crazy
seems
stuff,
like the biggest change that might happen. The fact that we can already, with the materials we have, build it on Mars is kind of an interesting thing.
Maybe it'll be used more for stuff like that for other planets with lower gravity and stuff like that. But yeah, and also as we were just saying, the railgun / spaceplane combo.
Hybrid systems maybe.
Yeah,
something
could be.
I mean, you got once you get like single stage to orbit and reusable rockets. Like, what's the next leap from those systems? The big like game changer in terms of cutting the price of space travel and stuff. It's got to be something like a structure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although
it might like an EM drive like powered vertical.
Well, yeah, we haven't even mentioned that when we talked about it last week, but like that would just that is a game changer in every way.
Yeah.
Like suddenly we just live in like the Star Wars universe.
More or less.
Like
yeah. I mean, would you even have a space elevator then?
Probably not.
You might not.
I mean, it depends how much thrust you can get out of these things, but say you could just like lift any object from a standstill into orbit. Say
no
propellant.
Say Roger Shore is like right. Yeah. And he says that like you can do single stage to orbit and stuff with it. Like, would you bother with space elevators? You might not.
Maybe not.
But obviously that thing seems like it's totally impossible. So
yeah. It might be.
We don't know. We don't know. Yeah.
Sorted.
Right. End of that topic.
Done it.
So Nutters of the week.
Nutters of the week.
I've got something to present to you.
Should do that.
It's related to transport.
Okay, love it.
You know that plane that disappeared, the Malaysian MH370?
Yeah. How's this going?
Well, obviously everything gets conspiracy theories behind it.
Yeah, especially stuff like this.
But there's some real tasty ones that I found.
Nice.
So there's an article here in theweek.co.uk, and it basically lists all the different kind of conspiracy theories that have come out of it. I thought they're rather entertaining. So firstly, one of them's kind of boring. You know the reunion debris that they found on Reunion Island?
Yeah.
They're fake. Something.
Sure.
I think actually.
Some governments put them there.
Yeah, or
right.
whatever.
Yeah, obviously.
Okay, fine. Second one,
mm-hmm.
which I suppose could be related to it. North Korea took MH370.
Of course.
Because they just get dragged into it, whatever, because there's like a secretive state.
Yeah.
North Korea took it. Vladimir Putin hijacked the plane.
Oh, what, personally?
That's what it says. He's accused of being involved in its disappearance anyway.
I could just imagine him like up in the pilot seat, just like photos of him up there.
And there's all sorts of stuff related to that. And he wanted to land at a Russian spaceport. There's all sorts of bizarre...
what would Putin want with a MH370?
Well, he wanted to... Apparently, this is what they say. Maybe he wanted to demonstrate to the US, which had imposed sanctions basically on Russia, that he could still hurt the West and its allies by hijacking
by secretly hijacking a plane and then nobody knowing about it. Right.
This one's good. 404. Okay, the plane not found. So 404 is like an error you get on a computer.
Yeah.
When you soon after that plane went missing, people started pointing out that MH370 was the 404th Boeing 777 to come off the production line.
Wait. What?
And so they're like asking like the significance about whether there's a further twist. A group called the Lizard Squad described itself as a cyber caliphate, hijacked the Malaysian Airlines website and replaced it with its content with the message reading 404 plane not found. But apparently actually made no further claims on it.
Right.
So people have been talking about there's some sort of weird like conspiracy thing there.
What, that involves like the error message you get when a website doesn't load?
Yeah.
How is that?
I don't know.
The internet is involved.
I don't know. The plane was shot down by the US military. I mean, that's not as crazy as... Probably not. Oh, yeah, probably not. Almost certainly not. And it was a life insurance scam. This is good. MH370 and MH17, which I think was the one that went down over the Ukraine.
Yes, it was, yeah.
Were the same plane.
Oh, of course they were. So they've just been flying around the world for like 6 months in between the two events.
Yeah. Alien abductions one.
Yeah,
5% of Americans surveyed by Reason.com believe that the plane was abducted by aliens.
5%?
Apparently.
5%. That's like 5 million people?
That's a lot.
10 million people? Something like that?
Yeah.
I
don't know why they're always serving...
Great going, guys.
Well, I think that's just it's an American website, so obviously so. I wonder what that would be in other countries. It probably vary from worse to better and whatever.
Yeah.
And also a 9/11 sort of style false flag
classic
attack thingy, so they can blame various other people and whatnot.
My favourite of all of those is the Putin one.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, and I like the error message one, and I don't really get it.
I mean, it doesn't make I don't really get what they're trying to say.
I like them being the same plane. That's good.
Yes, that's
They're
high
actually
quality.
the same plane. What?
Even though like
totally
we know
different.
like the passengers in both planes like were different, and
anytime any event happens, there's always like a conspiracy. Like any of this stuff we've been talking about, you build a space elevator and it's gonna be like it's a conspiracy to like control the weather and like
yeah. Well, that's what that HARP thing is. The other HARP thing that people say
it's
is
a weather control thing.
A weather control thing.
It is a weather control thing.
Yeah. That's used as like a giant super weapon or whatever.
Yeah.
That was great. A good list.
I like when Putin's involved in things. I can't help but be slightly amused.
I know. I just imagine him like hijacking this plane by somehow like parachuting onto the plane, like landing on it and just like crawling up, just him on his own, just like crawling up and like ripping the pilot out of the pilot seat.
Him and a cameraman just like
yeah. And he's just like got the Putin face, like turning around,
just
like,
flexing.
Yeah, like pulling the pilot out of the thing and climbing in. And
like
then,
Bane.
Exactly like Bane. Yes.
So I think that's the end of the show.
Yeah, it is, on that note.
So thank you very much for listening again.
Yeah, and keep those comments coming. We love them.
We do,
We'll be chatting about some more later, next time. Well, what are we talking about next time? We don't even really know at this point.
We haven't quite decided.
We've got a few ideas.
Maybe if anyone has ideas, we'll use them if we think it can be stretched into a full show.
People
have already suggested things like AI.
Yes.
We will do something with that.
AI. I mean, before we even started the episodes, we knew we were going to be doing stuff about AI, and that will be happening.
And that gets folded into so much other stuff anyway, because it is kind of like a potential deal breaker, game changer for absolutely everything.
Yeah, it could just fundamentally change.
All this shit we've been talking about, you just forget about it potentially.
Yeah.
But anyway. So we'll be doing some stuff soon.
Yeah, but that's probably not literally next episode.
I don't
but
think
it'll be coming up.
Yes,
coming
it will
up soon.
So yeah, we'll probably post on Twitter or something what we're doing or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other than that, thank you very much for listening as ever.
Yeah.
Off-worlders.
And spread the word if you like it. It's always good to grow the community.
Grow the off-worlders. Everyone. The more people we have to talk about crazy stuff,
the better it gets.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The more the merrier. All right.
See you later.
Thanks very much, guys.